Some stories don't begin with a murder, they begin with a mystery. A baby found broken, bruised, and fighting for her life in one of the country's best hospitals, and no one knowing who she belongs to. A mystery that seems like it'll be simple enough to solve. Or so the city believed, until investigators uncovered a truth far more disturbing than neglect. Because this baby wasn't discarded by a cruel mother, she was stolen from one. And that mother, she wasn't hiding, she was trapped, sold, trafficked. When Delhi police finally found her miles away in Rajasthan, what emerged was not just the story of her mother and her missing children, but the story of an entire trafficking machine humming beneath our feet. A machine involving pimps, fake relatives, forged marriages, disappearing children, and a web of criminals stretching from Bihar to Delhi to Rajasthan. And at the center of it all, a baby without a name, dying in a hospital. This is the story of baby Falak. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Aishwarya.
And I'm Aryan.
And the case that I have for you today is so incredibly heartbreaking, just the research alone was enough to bring me to tears. Aryan, I'm going to just start by asking a quintessential question. Do you know anything about this case at all? It's a 2012 case that took the country by storm.
Ash, great way to embarrass me right from the get-go of the episode, but the answer is obviously not. I'm a big Delhi crime fan. I've seen season 1, season 2. I haven't gotten the time to see season 3 just yet, and so naturally my answer is no, I know nothing about this case.
Aryan, this case to me was always kind of in the back of my mind. I think obviously I'd heard about it when I was much younger, but haven't revisited it in years now. And then obviously season 3 of Delhi Crime drops.
अरे लाडो रानी बड़ी सयानी.
And I am a huge fan as well. I find the cast absolutely phenomenal across seasons, incredibly well done, so gut-wrenching and chilling. Season 3 drops, I have to watch it. That episode 1 opening scene, it gave me chills. Zuma Qureshi is terrifying in her own right. That scene, it gave me shivers running down my back. But the entire show just made me wonder. We at Desi Crime have never covered this pivotal story. It's so significant. It covers themes that we at Desi Crime haven't touched on before in most of our stories. It just never happened to show up. And we've never covered this. So here we are today.
Ash, usually Netflix and Desi Crime compete for who covers the story first. And I hate to admit it, but Netflix won this time. So if you haven't checked out season 3 of Delhi Crime, it is... From what Aishwarya has been texting me all through the last couple of weeks, it's amazing. Go check it out. And now, Aishwarya, on with the story for today.
March 15th, 2012. AIIMS Trauma Center, New Delhi. The intensive care unit is plunged into chaos at 9:40 p.m. as alarms start blaring. Tiny 2-year-old Falak, the child who had miraculously clung to life for 2 months, had gone into cardiac arrest. Doctors and nurses raced to her bedside. They had already pulled this little girl back from the brink twice before, but this is her 3rd cardiac arrest in as many months. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, they perform CPR on her frail body and administer emergency medications. But seconds without a pulse turn into minutes without one. "Come on, baby, come on," a doctor murmurs under his breath, fighting desperately to revive the toddler. All the doctors, all the nurses, they're all staring at that screen with an irregular heartbeat, not knowing whether or not it'll come back this time. But how did it come to this? Who was baby Falak, and what nightmare of events led a 2-year-old to a hospital bed and an arrhythmia? And did she survive? To answer all of that, we have to go back to the beginning of this tale, to the night a battered toddler arrived at the hospital and a web of dark secrets began to unravel. On January 18th, 2012, 2 months before the night baby Falak died as the world watched, a teenage girl had walked into the emergency department of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences Trauma Center in New Delhi, cradling an unconscious toddler in her arms. The child's condition is so dire, it was heartbreaking to see on such a small body. Her head was completely swollen, both her tiny arms were broken, and angry purple bruises and human bite marks covered her body. A nurse gasped in shock at the sight of the baby's face. The child's soft cheeks had been branded with a hot iron. Seasoned doctors who rushed to help couldn't believe what they were seeing. Later, they would admit they had, quote, never seen a baby in such a condition, even in this busy trauma unit. This infant clearly had been subjected to relentless violence and torture. In the chaos of the ER, the 14-year-old girl who brought the baby attempts to explain the child's condition. She claims she's the child's mother and that little Falak simply fell from a bed. But this story immediately clocks as false to everyone who hears it. The pattern of Falak's injuries is far too extreme to result from a mere fall. Bite marks, burn scars, fractures. The doctors know they're looking at evidence of brutal child abuse, not an accident.
Ash, of course, all of that stands out, but what about the fact that it's a 14-year-old mother?
Not normal by any standard. Even the fact that this is the child's mother, I don't think anyone in the ER who's coming in contact with this young girl is believing that at that point in time. Nothing about this is making any sense. The police are very quickly about to get involved and probe exactly that question. Is she really this child's mother? But this moment, when this child has been brought in, isn't the moment to decode the mystery of what happened to her. That moment was the time to make sure the hospital did everything to help her survive. The team of doctors and nurses quickly got to work to stabilize the toddler as best as they could and placed her on a ventilator to support her breathing. Given the obvious medico-legal nature of the case, hospital authorities notified the police immediately. Under bright hospital lights, baby Falak, a name meaning sky given by ICU nurses since her identity was unknown, lay comatose on life support. Her tiny frame was a patchwork of wounds that were hard to look at even for veteran medical professionals. Once doctors were able to examine her injuries more thoroughly, though, they quickly realized the full scope of them. Doctors found that the toddler's body had been subjected to such abuse that her skull was fractured and there was a blood clot on one side of her brain. She had both arms broken and her left hand too was fractured with swelling on the right one, and there were human bite marks, quote, all over her face, forehead and right leg, end quote. The branding on her cheeks with a hot iron was particularly jarring to everyone who looked, with doctors quickly confirming that the head injuries, quote, appeared as if the baby's head was smashed against a wall or she suffered a blow from a heavy object, end quote. Neurosurgeon Sumit Sinha described the injuries as consistent with someone throwing the child or striking the child with heavy force, while another report noted that the severity of head wounds suggested she had been hurled against a hard surface. As doctors worked through the night to relieve pressure on her brain and clean her wounds, police officers began to question the teenage girl who brought Falak in. Who was she? What happened to this child? This girl, this teenage girl, insists her name is Lakshmi, again claims to be Falak's mother, and again claims that the child simply had a fall from her bed. But when aggressively confronted with the medical evidence of abuse and the obvious fact that none of the injuries matched a fall, the teen's story shifted. It was not long before authorities realized that both the toddler and the teen were victims of a much larger and more sinister story. By the next morning, news of the battered baby admitted to AIIMS had begun filtering into the press. The shocking image of a 2-year-old fighting for her life with such horrific injuries stirred anger and sadness across India. Inside the trauma ICU, doctors were grim about Falak's chances though. Her chances are 50-50, one doctor told the media bluntly. By this point, they had already performed an emergency surgery on her, but still, Falak remained in a deep coma, her vital signs unstable. She had no visitors, no family, only the medical staff and the teen who brought her in. But that teen was now under scrutiny, and within days of baby Falak's hospitalization, investigators confirmed what the doctors and Aryan suspected. The 14-year-old girl was not Falak's mother at all. In fact, she was a runaway child herself, a victim masquerading briefly as a mother. Under questioning by the Child Welfare Committee, the teenager broke down and confessed the truth. A man she was living with handed her the baby about a month ago, instructing her to take care of the child as if it were her own. The man's name was Rajkumar, but he also went by the alias Muhammad Dilshad, and he was the teen's much older boyfriend, she said, effectively her captor though.
Aishwarya, what do you mean? Those are two very different names, though. One is.
Very different names.
So, which is his real name, and why the alias of another religion? Effectively, like, does that serve a purpose?
It struck out to me as so incredibly odd, and surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, that's true for a lot of characters in their stories, that their actual name and their alias are completely different religions, and in both directions, mind you. So it's just really fascinating. His actual name is Rajkumar. Muhammad Dilshad was his alias. Now, this teen told the police a tragic tale of how she eloped with Rajkumar the previous year after fleeing an abusive home where she was sexually assaulted by her own father, only to find herself trapped in another cycle of sexual and physical abuse. One where Rajkumar, her supposed savior, now sexually assaulted her too and left her no way of escaping. Now, as a 14-year-old thrust into playing mother to an injured toddler, the teen found herself overwhelmed and rightly traumatized. Investigators by this point had begun to suspect that in the month that this teenage girl had baby Falak, the teenager may have lashed out at the child in frustration, perhaps repeating the abuse she herself knew too well. Even prominent doctors later came forward to say the teenage girl's psychological scars likely translated into physical violence against the baby. Bite marks on Falak's tiny body could well match the teen's dental impressions, a scary early possibility that the authorities began to consider. And sure enough, the teen's story to the police and the doctors who psychologically evaluated her during those early days confirmed this cycle of abuse. The counselor's report submitted to the Child Welfare Committee outlined a few such incidents of abuse towards Falak. For example, it was revealed that on the night of 17th January, the baby began crying and, quote, out of anger, the girl slapped the baby 3-4 times and bit her, end quote. Later, while changing the baby's nappy, the girl said the child slipped from her hands in the bathroom and, quote, hit her head on the floor, bleeding profusely. Instead of seeking immediate medical attention, she bandaged the wound and phoned Rajkumar, who told her not to go out at night, because of which the baby was only taken to the hospital the next afternoon. It became clear to inspectors and doctors that during the days the girl was the sole custodian of the child, she became more and more frustrated and, quote, thrashed and even bit her, hoping the child would stop crying, end quote. Investigators therefore believed the assault was not a single accident but a combination of neglect, blows, bites, and branding inflicted by the teen girl in multiple moments of rage that spanned a month. The police realized there's some sort of chain here of adults who seem to have possession of Falak but are not related to her, and that wasn't making sense. This chain had somehow created the perfect circumstances for Falak's abuse. In this case, though, the line between villain and victim was blurred right from the start. The teenager is both a survivor of heinous abuse and a perpetrator of abuse towards Falak. The law will have to untangle this knot, but for now, the immediate goal is to save Falak's life and find her real family.
Ash, it's not just a legal knot to untangle. It's a moral knot, because what baby Falak underwent, if that was adult Falak, I would have been astonished. But every time you describe the torture, the kind of abuse this 2-year-old was undergoing, my body was curling up. For her to have survived is a miracle, honestly.
It is.
But then at the same time, there is this 14-year-old who is allegedly the perpetrator. And it's a juvenile. It's not even a 17, 18-year-old juvenile. It's a 14-year-old juvenile who has found herself in circumstances that are more than traumatizing. I mean, she's a victim in her own right. I don't know how to untangle that moral knot about what I'm feeling.
Such an incredibly tough question. And I wanted to... This case makes me want to read more stories of severe victims of abuse who've perpetrated that, and how how jurisprudence across the world has dealt with it. It's been such a fascinating question that has now played on my mind, is that what are the different ways that the law can possibly untangle this really, really confusing question. I'm assuming it starts not with jail time, it starts with like a psychiatric facility of some kind, it starts with mental evaluations and medical evaluations and whatnot. But when it comes to sentencing, when it comes to punishment for the crime, what have countries across the world done in situations like these? I'm very, very curious, because it's such a hard question to answer.
I mean, I don't know what happened in this case, but that's the, we've seen this time and time again, even with Delhi Crime Season 1, the Nirbhaya case, where there was one juvenile, right, who was to be treated under the juvenile laws. The juvenile laws do not go on a case-to-case basis earlier. Now there has been, after the Nirbhaya case, an exception within the Juvie Code, which is that if the case is so egregious, a juvenile over the age of 16, I think it is, can be treated as an adult. But usually, juvenile laws are binary. And, just because the case becomes popular and unimaginable for the national conscience, the person is not treated as an adult. They're still treated as a juvenile. So I doubt, and I don't know what happened in this case, but I doubt she would be sent to prison. I think she'd be sent to juvenile detention.
And so, armed with all of this information, Delhi police swiftly launched a full-scale investigation spanning multiple states, and very quickly, they home in on Rajkumar, the man who abandoned Falak with the teenage girl. Rajkumar had since vanished, likely running because he knows what awaits if the baby's condition is traced back to him. But in their hunt for Rajkumar, investigators learned something significant. That Rajkumar had obtained baby Falak from another contact of his, a woman he knew, who in turn had been handed the baby by yet another woman, possibly the child's biological mother. This convoluted chain of custody makes it clear that Falak's short life had passed through many hands, and so police teams spread out to track every link in this chain. One team is dispatched to the city of Mumbai, where Rajkumar reportedly fled, and they do manage to locate his family there, hoping it'll lead them back to Rajkumar himself. Another team heads east to Bihar, pursuing leads that Falak may have actually come from outside Delhi. A third team fans out across Delhi's underbelly, hunting for anyone who had contact with the baby in recent months. As these efforts intensify, the nation's media chases every development. For the first time, the public learns the name, Baby Falak. Day after day, newspapers and TV channels carry updates on her condition, her surgeries, and the police investigation. And soon, India is transfixed.
While the 2-year-old remains stable but critical, her health has not deteriorated in the past couple of days. There is some eye movement and doctors are trying to control her high heartbeat. Now, India continues to pray for this baby who has been a victim of the worst kind of abuse, bitten, battered and abandoned.
For 2 months, Indians followed the story as she underwent multiple surgeries, ABC News would later note, as headlines about the case dominated the country's news cycle. Offers of help began pouring in from across India and even abroad, as ordinary people expressed anguish and anger over what happened to the child. Donation, prayers, even adoption offers, the outpouring of compassion was unprecedented. The AIIMS hospital staff politely declined monetary help since the state was to cover Falak's care, but the moral support lifts their spirits as they walk into the hospital every day to help heal the child. Even Delhi's chief minister at the time, Sheila Dikshit, publicly promised that the government will provide long-term care and supervision for the baby once she recovers. If she recovers. Baby Falak had unwittingly become everyone's baby, the symbol of an innocent victim whom an entire nation now desperately wanted to save. Meanwhile, the 14-year-old girl, Falak's supposed guardian, is placed in a juvenile protection home rather than a jail cell. Given her own harrowing history, authorities treated her as a victim of child abuse and trafficking, which indeed she was. In fact, in early February, Delhi police went so far as to arrest the teen's father back in her hometown, acting on her accusations that he sexually abused her. They also hunt down 3 other individuals connected to the girl's abuse, likely brothel operators and neighbors who turned a blind eye. Clearly, the case of baby Falak was rapidly expanding in scope, because what began as a simple, if horrific, instance of child abuse is now opening up to be a much wider story of trafficking and abuse that seemed to have engulfed multiple children and women. The image of the battered toddler in the hospital had become a catalyst for police to uncover an entire criminal nexus operating in the shadows. With so many sub-investigations underway, Delhi police ended up having a much clearer picture of the key players and the tragic journey that brought baby Falak into the teens' arms. But to truly understand Falak and her story, they needed to find one person who had been missing from the start. Falak's real mother. Only she could fill in the earliest chapters of this little girl's life. But the search for Falak's family was about to yield answers that no one expected, shedding light on a tale of deceit, desperation, and exploitation that runs far deeper than anyone initially imagined. And this breakthrough came on February 6, 2012. Acting on leads from one of their Bihar team, the Delhi police trace a young Bihari woman named Munni to a village in Rajasthan. She was 22 years old, and when officers found her, she was living with a man who claimed to be her husband, a new husband, a second husband. And so Munni is quickly brought in Delhi for questioning, where, sitting in a police station, trembling and tearful, this young woman confirms what investigators had hoped. She is baby Falak's biological mother. But as her story spills out, it becomes clear that Munni had been living through a hell of her own, one that intersects with her daughter's tale.
This is going from a domestic issue to a nexus almost.
Yes.
I'm still to figure out what this trafficking is for. And perhaps you'll get to it. Please tell me you'll get to it. Okay.
Yes, of course.
Not a cliffhanger that you will keep me hooked on. But I'm a little bit of housekeeping here. So Rajkumar got baby Falak from a woman who got it from the biological mother.
Possibly, yes.
Possibly. And that biological mother, the police thinks, was in Bihar. They've gotten her down, and she has apparently confessed to being the mother and finds herself in a predicament of her own. So that middle woman is still on the loose. We don't know who that is. And the intentions behind this nexus is still to be uncovered, correct?
Correct, absolutely. Now, suddenly at the center of this tragedy is a woman named Munni. She was the woman that everyone was looking for, but one that no one imagined they would find. And yet, when Delhi police finally tracked her down, what emerged was not a story of a mother abandoning her child, but one of more devastation and betrayal for yet another female in this story. Munni's full name is Munni Khatun, and she grew up in a poor family in Bihar. And she tells police she was married off in 2006 when she was just 16. Her first husband, a man named Shah Hussain with whom she lived in Bihar, quickly showed her his true colors after their marriage. A deeply abusive man with a history of petty crimes that followed his name. Despite the abuse, and sometimes because of the abuse, the two went on to have 3 children together. A son, a daughter, and baby Falak, who was the youngest. According to Munni's parents, who are Falak's maternal grandparents, Shah Hussain crossed the line from what was considered routine domestic abuse into something truly unthinkable. He sold his own wife and children into the flesh trade, to be cycled through a system of sexual exploitation and prostitution, all before he himself ran away to evade the police who were after him for his petty crimes. In a startling statement to the press, the grandparents alleged that about 6 months earlier, Shah Hussain took Munni and the kids to Delhi under the pretense of a fresh start, only to sell them off, quote, for trading. Our son-in-law is the real culprit, Munni's mother sobbed, claiming he effectively trafficked his own family for money. It's a shocking accusation, but there is another version to this story. In this second version, Shah Hussain didn't actually sell his family in Delhi before running off. He simply ran away from his home in Bihar because he wanted to flee the police, leaving his wife and children alone. Munni was left behind, a young mother with no partner, no income, and nowhere to go. That is when, somehow, a nexus of brothel owners and sex traffickers got word of a lonely young woman with 3 children living in a village in Bihar. And that is when Munni began receiving calls from a man named Shankar. He began calling her relentlessly, promising marriage, promising stability, promising the kind of life she hadn't seen in years. Munni resisted at first, but when she finally asked to meet his family, Shankar introduced her to Lakshmi, a woman who told Munni exactly what she wanted to hear. That she was young, that she deserved another chance, that Delhi held the key to a new future. This is where our two stories converge. Either Munni was left in Delhi by her husband and she ended up meeting Lakshmi after she arrived, or she arrived in Delhi herself after her husband left because she thought a better world awaited, because she had already talked to Lakshmi about it. Regardless, Munni was now in Delhi, in an unfamiliar city with 3 young children and in the company of an eerie, unfamiliar woman, Lakshmi. By August of 2011, Munni and her 3 children were inside Lakshmi's Uttamnagar home. Lakshmi seemed kind at first, promising Munni a good job in Delhi and a better future for her babies by offering to send them to madarsas and hostels, claiming it was the only way forward. But in reality, Lakshmi was an experienced trafficker lurking like a wolf in the shadows. She soon tried to coerce Munni into prostitution, attempting to force the young mother into Delhi's sex trade with false promises of all kinds. Munni resisted bravely. She refused to become a sex worker despite their pressure. But then, frustrated by the failure of their first plan to exploit her, Lakshmi came up with an alternate scheme. She would profit by selling Munni into a forced marriage instead. And from there, the manipulation deepened. She built the narrative brick by brick that a second marriage for her would fix everything, that Munni needed a husband to survive, that her children would remain nearby, safe, waiting for her. Then came 2 more women named Saroj and Kanta, entering the picture like characters written into a script. Saroj spoke of a cousin in Junjunu, Rajasthan, a widower, lonely, stable, ready for marriage, while Kanta painted a picture of a future that for the first time felt attainable to someone drowning. But for the marriage to happen, Munni was told, the children had to stay behind, just temporarily, with Lakshmi and Saroj. Once her new husband accepted her, she'd bring the children home. It was all a performance though. Fake relatives, fake promises, fake hope. A cruelty designed to separate a mother from her babies, because the truth was that Saroj's cousin wasn't a welcoming widower open to a new partner. He was a man who had specifically paid this nexus of traffickers 2.2 lakh rupees for a young, virgin bride. And he was also willing to pay this price because he wasn't just expecting a wife, but effectively a virgin slave. That is exactly why Munni needed to be separated from the kids, to keep the illusion that she was a virgin. And there was never any plan to bring the 3 of them back to her. In September 2011, roughly 4 months before baby Falak's hospitalization, Lakshmi and her team arranged Munni's marriage to this man. In Munni's anguished mind, this seemed like the only chance for her children to have a stable life. So with a heavy heart, she agreed. She left her children in the care of those unfamiliar women and went off to Rajasthan to begin this ill-fated second marriage. What happened next was a mother's worst nightmare. For starters, within 3 days of the marriage, the man discovered that Munni did in fact have 3 children who were back in Delhi, and that to him was unacceptable in a bride. And Munni discovered she had been deceived too. She had begged for her children, she had asked where they were, but as soon as she left Delhi for Rajasthan, the traffickers divided the 3 children among their accomplices. Baby Falak, who was around 18 months old at the time, was left with Lakshmi for a few days. But Lakshmi already had 4 children of her own, and caring for another infant was the last thing on her mind. She quickly handed the baby over to a man named Manoj, essentially passing Falak down the line like cattle. Manoj in turn passed Falak to another acquaintance of his, who then passed the baby to Rajkumar, the same man who would later give the baby to the teenage girl at the hospital. In this way, Falak was shuttled from one uncaring adult to another over a span of months, a helpless pawn in their exploitation. Falak's older siblings met a slightly better fate, though still traumatic. The trafficker Lakshmi took Falak's 3-year-old sister and delivered the child to Munni's own relatives in Bihar. That little girl at least ended up in some version of home, albeit still separated from her mother. Falak's 5-year-old brother was given away to someone in Delhi, later identified as a street vendor in the Uttamnagar area of West Delhi. In essence, the 3 siblings were scattered to the wind by the very people who had promised Munni they would take care of them. It's horrifying to realize that in the eyes of these traffickers, children were just commodities to be sold, traded, or abandoned as it suited them. And so, with another piece of the puzzle discovered, by mid-February 2012, police were rapidly rounding up those responsible. On February 6th, the same day Munni was found, officers arrested Lakshmi, Kanta Chaudhary and Saroj, the 3 women who engineered this entire tragedy. A senior police official describes Kanta as a 50-something woman from Rajasthan and Lakshmi as her younger associate. Now Munni, confronted with all that transpired, was devastated. She had last seen her baby Falak 4 months ago when handing her to Lakshmi, and she could have never imagined the cruelty that would befall her own child. According to police, Munni accepted that Falak is her daughter and tearfully admitted she had felt unable to raise her alone back then. She was convinced by the traffickers that giving up her children might paradoxically secure their future. That misplaced trust will haunt her forever, she said. With that, the search for Rajkumar, the man who ultimately abandoned Falak, intensified. On February 10th, in a dramatic turn, Delhi police caught Rajkumar as he attempted to flee the city. He was arrested at the Delhi railway station, having run out of luck and places to hide. Along with him, a woman named Pratima was also arrested. Pratima was identified as a part of the human trafficking racket, possibly the broker who facilitated the teen girl's exploitation in a brothel. In custody, Rajkumar confirms the pieces of the puzzle. He had met the 14-year-old girl, the one who brought Falak to the hospital a year ago, and he claims to have rescued her by taking her away to live with him. One day, an acquaintance, likely Manoj, who we've heard of before, gave him baby Falak to take care of, and he took the baby home. But Rajkumar was no savior. He was an abuser himself. And when Falak's health deteriorated under the couple's care, Rajkumar cowardly dumped the responsibility on the teen girl and ran. By now, the police had arrested a whole gallery of suspects. Ultimately, 10 people were taken into custody in connection with baby Falak's case at this point. They include Rajkumar, who was slapped with charges for violating the minor girl and for child abandonment, Pratima for human trafficking, Lakshmi and Kanta for tricking Munni and separating her children, and several other intermediaries who were part of the chain. Even the teenage girl, despite her victim status, was formally detained under the juvenile justice system, though her treatment was far more sympathetic, with her being provided counseling and being kept in a juvenile home rather than a jail. This case went on to expose a dark criminal network spanning child trafficking, forced prostitution, child abuse, and domestic slavery. Quote, "This has turned out to be one of the biggest sex rackets involving minors and the sale of women for marriage," said Raj Mangal Prasad, head of the Child Welfare Committee, as the investigation concluded. The Union Home Ministry itself acknowledged that Falak's ordeal is a case of human trafficking of a magnitude rarely seen. Follow the mother and you see how the machinery worked. Munni, a young woman from Bihar, is coaxed to Delhi by a trafficker promising stability. Once there, she is separated from her 3 children, steered into a bogus fresh start, and sold into a second marriage in Rajasthan for 2.2 lakh rupees. Around her, the same names recur like station stops on a known route. Shankar lures, Lakshmi stages the handoffs, Kanta Chaudhary brokers the sale, Saroj knits the introductions, Manoj moves the child, Rajkumar finally ends the chain by creating the perfect circumstances for abuse. Follow the child, and the contours of this abuse sharpen. Falak passes from Lakshmi to Manoj to Rajkumar and finally to a 14-year-old girl, a minor herself, left to care for a toddler she did not birth and could not keep safe. Similarly, follow the teenager, and the other half of this racket comes into view. This isn't a crime of passion, it's a process. And the baby's journey, the mother's journey, and the teenage girl's journeys are not parallel tragedies. They're 3 arms of the same racket meeting on one hospital bed. If you're trying to measure the magnitude of trafficking we've witnessed in this case, think in layers, not in headcounts. Layer 1 is geography. Bihar to Delhi to Rajasthan, with tentacles into Uttar Pradesh and Haryana. Interstate, not local. Layer 2 is division of labor. The lurer, the persuader, the matchmaker, the transporter, the keeper, the buyer, each a distinct role occupied by a different person. Layer 3 is the product line. The same network moving a toddler, selling a mother as a bride, and monetizing a teenager through prostitution. And Layer 4 is visibility. Even with arrests in the double digits, some actors remain rumors and initials, not names and charges. That is the real scope the Falak case revealed. A single abuse victim whose ordeal lit up the wiring diagram of a wider criminal economy, one that thrives in the space between homes, slums, bus stations, and borderlines. Falak's injuries were the smoke, and the fire was the system. A system that could sell a mother, repurpose a teenager, and pass a baby like contraband, until a hospital intake and a national audience forced the doors open and counted, at least for a moment, how many heads were inside.
Ash, in this case, the smoke is what led us to the fire.
Yeah.
what worries me is that, to continue the analogy, this is not the only fire there is. This is not the only fire there was, but it's the only trail we as a society were A, able to spotlight, and B, able to follow. And, I feel a little disappointed in myself, and as a extension of that in ourselves, that we're from Delhi, you and I, right? We know for a fact that sex rackets are a common thing.
Right.
Never has that fact led to such a visceral response in my body. It is a fact we live with, that our cities have these, and it is common.
Yep.
It requires such a heinous, traumatic event to be highlighted by the news for us to feel the moral knot, for us to feel guilty of letting this happen, and for us to then go and chase this.
I also feel like for me as a true crime consumer, a long time true crime consumer, there are crimes that are easy to conceptualize in your mind, a kidnapping, a stalking, a murder out of a jealous fit of rage. It's all easy to visualize because we've seen it so much in media. We've seen it so much in movies. We've read it so much in our books, true crime podcasting. We've heard of it. This is an organized crime system that's so hard to wrap your head around till there is a tangible story in front of you that's saying these are the layers. This is the chain of custody. This is how a human being has been passed down through layers in cities and states and people. It's just when I'm reading all this, I'm like, never in my life have I given a second worth of thought to how human trafficking actually works. Just the scope of the nexus has never sat with me because it's not common in media. And I hope something like the Delhi Crime season 3, something like this episode will sort of shed light to that. Because I don't think it's talked about enough in true crime circles, in sort of common media, in our movies we see. And naturally, it's just hard to wrap your head around. Yeah. Now, amid the victories of these arrests, there were also reunions. On February 7th, police located and rescued Falak's missing siblings. The 3-year-old, the elder child, is found safe with a distant relative in Bihar. She's brought back to Delhi and given a thorough medical check. Miraculously, she showed no signs of physical abuse and was declared healthy. She was then placed under care at a children's welfare home, clutching a little doll and asking for her mother. A week later, on February 15th, authorities tracked down Falak's 5-year-old brother in Delhi. He had been living in Delhi with that street vendor in Uttamnagar, unaware of the storm raging around his baby sister's case. With this, all 3 of Munni's children were finally accounted for and safe. The Delhi police, in a rare moment of triumph amid tragedy, arranged for Munni to regain custody of her older 2 kids, and they were both soon reunited with their mother off camera, away from the media frenzy. It was a small ray of light in an otherwise dark saga. Munni could hold them in her arms, grateful that at least they were not physically harmed. And what of Munni's youngest child, baby Falak? By mid-February, Falak remained hospitalized in critical condition, but there was cautious optimism about her progress. Doctors had fought tooth and nail for this little girl's life, and she had surprised them more than once.
I have not seen a child in my career who's had 2 cardiac arrests, has sepsis, so many complications, and severe head injury and come out. So her recovery is not anything less than a miracle.
On February 15th, an intensely emotional scene played out in the AIIMS Trauma Center. Munni was allowed to visit her baby for the first time. The ICU is hushed as the 22-year-old mother walks in, escorted by a nurse. Falak lies in a crib, tiny and fragile amidst a tangle of tubes and machines. Munni approaches and simply stares, speechless at her child, the child she last saw as a bubbly infant months ago, now fighting for her life in a coma. She is instructed to speak softly, to encourage Falak with her presence, but Munni can barely find her voice. She gently touches the baby's bandaged hand and whispers, "Ammi is here." Witnesses later say, with tears in her eyes, Munni stood there for 15 minutes, taking in the heartbreaking sight of her daughter covered in wires, surrounded by beeping machines. When Munni exited the ICU, she broke down weeping in the hallway. Doctors and nurses tried to comfort her, assuring her that they were doing everything possible. For the medical staff, this reunion fueled a renewed determination. They were not going to give up on baby Falak. Not now, not after everything that had been exposed and everyone who had been rescued because of her. Falak's survival had become, in a way, a matter of national honor and hope. In the week that followed, the team at AIIMS Trauma Center worked tirelessly to heal baby Falak's broken body. It was a daunting challenge. Falak had arrived with severe brain trauma, rampant infections, and multiple organ complications. She had already undergone several critical surgeries since January 18th. Neurosurgeons had operated to drain blood clots and relieve swelling in her brain, and orthopedic surgeons had set her tiny fractured arms in casts. Each time the doctors addressed one issue, though, another seemed to arise. At one point, Falak contracted meningitis, a dangerous brain infection likely due to her open head wounds and prolonged ICU stay. She survived that, only to suffer episodes of unstable heartbeat and even cardiac arrest during her treatment. In fact, she flatlined twice, giving the ICU staff 2 scares where they had to resuscitate her heart. Falak's little body had been through a war, enduring what would break even the strongest adults. Slowly, under round-the-clock care and what some would call divine grace though, baby Falak began to pull through. By mid-February, about a month into her hospitalization, doctors note that her infections were finally coming under control. Culture showed no new bacteria growth in her brain fluid, an encouraging sign that the meningitis was beaten back. On February 18th, neurosurgeon Dr. Deepak Agarwal decided it's time for another major step. They were to perform a shunt surgery at midnight, placing a tube to drain excess fluid from Falak's brain into her spine. The procedure was risky but necessary to prevent life-threatening hydrocephalus, which is fluid pressure, and further infections. And it goes well. As days pass, Falak remains critical but now stable, a word the team hadn't dared use since the frantic early weeks. She's still on the ventilator for breathing support, but her vital signs have plateaued to safer levels. The doctors who once tempted every update with uncertainty now allow a glimmer of hope to creep into their voices. By the end of February 2012, an astonishing development took place. Baby Falak opened her eyes. She was no longer comatose. Her level of consciousness had improved. She couldn't speak or sit up, of course. Her brain and body needed much more time to heal, but the mere flutter of her eyelids was enough to send chills through the ICU. Nurses swear she even let out a soft cry now and then, reacting to discomfort, a sign that somewhere in there, the child was fighting to live. On March 2, 2012, the battered baby, as she was called, achieves what felt nearly impossible a few weeks prior. Falak is taken off the ventilator and breathes on her own for the first time.
As 2-year-old baby Falak's health continues to improve, she has been taken off the ventilator and her vital signs are looking positive.
She shifted out of the ICU into a regular ward as her reliance on life support decreases. The staff start calling her Miracle Baby because surviving such horrific injuries and complications is virtually unheard of. Doctors marvel at her. One junior doctor grins and tells a reporter, "She's a little fighter. She wants to live." News of Falak's improvement spreads rapidly, bringing joy to people following her story. Many had braced themselves for bad news, but now those same people rejoice in every bit of progress. "Baby Falak has survived," declares one headline in early March. Offers to adopt her, which had trickled in earlier, now flood the hospital's inbox. Couples from India and abroad volunteer to give Falak a loving home once she recovers. "If Falak has no family, we will become her family," say countless strangers. Of course, Falak does have a family though. Her mother Munni, who visits whenever allowed, and 2 siblings who can't wait to see their baby sister. But given Munni's situation, with her now living in a women's shelter and rebuilding her own life after trauma, child welfare authorities consider it prudent to line up foster or adoptive care just in case. It seems like everyone wants the best for Falak now, to make up for all the hurt she endured. Inside the ward, nurses shower attention on the baby. They cradle her, sing lullabies, and decorate her bed with soft toys donated by well-wishers. One nurse recounts how the entire pediatric unit doted on Falak. Quote, "She would cry and the whole unit would go to see what happened to her. Each one of us was so attached to the baby." End quote. After weeks of seeing her lifeless and tethered to machines, the staff were overjoyed to see Falak behaving almost like a normal toddler who would move her limbs a little and track people with her eyes. A normal little child, albeit a very weak, recovering one. But even with all of this recovery, her future was still uncertain. Doctors cautioned that the extensive brain damage means she might never develop normally. Quote, if she survives, there are high chances she will have stunted brain development or a low consciousness level, Dr. Agarwal had warned. But for the moment, those grim possibilities were set aside. The focus is on the miracle in front of them. Falak is alive against all odds. By March 8, 2012, Falak was nearly ready to be discharged from the hospital. Physically, she was healing well, her infections had cleared, and her surgeries had set her on the path to recovery. The authorities make plans to transfer Falak to a childcare institution temporarily until Munni is in a position to care for her. It is March 15, 2012, the day when, despite all of this progress, the trauma center at AIIMS found itself in a panic. The day began like any other day, with baby Falak playing by her own limited capabilities. But that evening, without warning, everything unraveled. Falak had been experiencing episodes of cardiac arrhythmia, an irregular heartbeat, a lingering effect of the severe abuse and infections. Around 9:30 p.m., as little Falak sleeps in her hospital crib, her damaged heart falls out of rhythm into a fatal arrhythmia. In an instant, her blood pressure plummets and she goes once more into cardiac arrest. The ICU team's heroic efforts to resuscitate her, the scene we described in the beginning, fail to bring her back. After 59 days of a valiant fight, baby Falak's fragile body cannot go on, and she dies in the arms of the doctors who refuse to give up on her.
Because of slowing down heart rate, she actually went into arrest while she was being closely monitored. But this time we were not lucky to revive her, and she was declared dead at 9:40 p.m.
The news hits the country like a punch to the gut. Just a week earlier, headlines had been optimistic, even triumphant about her recovery. Now, on March 16th, somber news anchors report that, quote, 2-year-old battered baby Falak has lost her battle for life. Vigils spring up that night outside AIIMS and in cities across India. People light candles for a child they never met, but whose suffering had moved an entire nation. At the hospital, seasoned trauma surgeons weep openly. Quote, we really thought she'd make it, one whispers, his voice choking.
She was off the ventilatory support for the last maybe some 2 weeks, and she has been opening eyes. She has been accepting oral feeds as well. These were the good signs of improvement that she was showing. So we grew hopeful also in that sense.
It was as if a collective family was grieving. India had embraced baby Falak as a daughter, and now that daughter was gone. On March 16th, under directions of the Child Welfare Committee, Falak's tiny body was released to Munni for a burial. In a quiet ceremony at Firozshah Kotla Burial Ground in Delhi, Munni lay her baby to rest. There were no crowds, just a handful of officials, some empathetic police officers, and Munni's remaining children, finally reunited, but at what cost? Munni kisses the white shroud covering her daughter one last time and places her in the earth. Falak's short life is over, but in many ways, her story is only beginning to reverberate through India's conscience. In the aftermath of Falak's death, the legal cases against all of the perpetrators move forward. Rajkumar is formally sentenced. All of the traffickers are all formally sentenced. That minor girl who brought Falak to the hospital is charged but kept in a juvenile detention center. And then suddenly, there was another legal breakthrough. Munni's husband, Shah Hussain, the man who allegedly sold his family, who had vanished even before the case broke, was now caught by June 2012. In a twist of fate, Shah Hussain was arrested for an unrelated crime, a gang rape case, and only then did authorities realize he was the same man implicated by Munni's parents. It was a reminder that perpetrators of violence often commit more than one kind of horrible act. And with that, by mid-March 2012, police told reporters that public pressure had, quote, led to the arrest of 13 people for human trafficking linked to Falak's case. Now sure, these arrests have been made and we can all find solace in that one silver lining in this story. But the truth is that 40,000 children go missing in India every single year, of which 11,000 are never found, most of whom end up in exactly this cycle of trafficking and abuse. It is true that Munni today is rehabilitated in Delhi and we can all find solace in that. But the truth is that there are countless Munnis out in this country whose stories we will never likely hear, who who will never have the chance at a better life. This feels like, unfortunately, a story with no happy ending. Yet it's also a story that led to justice for some and awareness for millions. In her short life, she brought light to the suffering of many others and perhaps saved some lives by triggering action. Falak's name, given in her hour of need, means the sky, and maybe that's where her soul rests now, free from pain, spanning the sky like a little star.
If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Kadak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.